On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the U.S. Navy has released its 30-year plan on shipbuilding. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, the U.S. Navy releases annually, as mandated by Congress, a report on what it looks like it's going to be building in terms of ships over the next 30 years. I thought we'd take a look at that report because there's some really interesting elements in there, and what the Navy says they want versus what they have planned to build seem to be two different things. And we're going to break that down and take a look at it. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the story over at USNI News by Sam LaGrone and Mallory Shelbourne, two friends of What's Going On with Shipping. New Navy long-range shipbuilding plan details 19 ship decommissionings in fiscal year 2025. So the U.S. Navy has got an objective for what they want. There's the number that's floating out there, 355 ships, but we're nowhere near that. We're under 300 ships right now. But what's more disturbing in this plan is that if you look over the short term, the next 5 years, and if you even go 15 years out, the size of the Navy decreases. We are decommissioning more ships, taking them out of service, than we are bringing ships in. And it doesn't look like the Navy ever gets to its end objective, which is that 355 ships. And if you go over to USNI News, and I strongly recommend that, great source, you'll see they discuss a whole series of issues. So, for example, Mallory Shelbourne just had this story. The aircraft carrier Enterprise, which is the third of the Ford-class carriers, this would be CVN 80, its delivery is now going to be delayed by 18 months. The ship just in front of it, CVN 79, John F. Kennedy, is going to take 10 years to complete. That is a long time to build a ship. And now we see Enterprise being pushed out. That'll get it about 7 years from time it was laid down until it is commissioned. But there's been problems with Ford. Even though Ford came out, there were years until Ford went into active service. It just did its first successful full deployment the other year. It came out in 2016. So the issues with the carriers are significant. And then even on the lower end, the smaller combatant ships, the first Constellation frigate is going to be delayed at least a year. Constellation FFG 62, which is the new smaller variant of the surface warfare vessel. It's smaller than a destroyer, bigger than an LCS. It's going to be pushed back a year. You're not going to see the first one of these until 2027. And the initial operating capability of the ship is listed out at about 2030. So we're talking about quite a while till we start seeing these vessels. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the report and break this down. So here's the report. Again, this is mandated by Congress, and the Navy over the past few years has gotten in a little bit of trouble for not delivering this report, and at times delivering the report with no details in it. So now this report has come out. It usually hits about March or April when we see it come out. So this is a fairly key chart, and I'll have the link to all the stories and obviously this report. This is the chart that sets out basically the size of the U.S. Navy. And it was back in 2016 that the U.S. Navy came up with the number of 355 ships. So 12 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, 104 large surface combatants, these are cruisers and destroyers, 52 smaller combatants is a mix of LCS and the new FFGs, 38 amphibious warfare, 66 attack submarines, 12 ballistic missile submarines, 34 combat logistics forces, and 37 command and support vessels. That gets you your 355. If you look at the report that came out in June of 2023, that number has been amped up to 515 vessels. And where you see the major change in that number is a decrease in number of amphibious warfare vessels, which is very controversial, because the Marines and the Navy are kind of going back and forth depending on which commandant is in now in the Marine Corps. You see a big change in combat logistics forces. You also see a substantial change in the addition of unmanned vehicles. These are the uncrewed vessels, 134 vessels on top of 381 manned vessels. But while this is all notional and great, we are nowhere near this, let's be clear. And what the Navy submitted for shipbuilding doesn't get you anywhere close to this. So this chart is included here largely because of former congressional representative Elaine Luria from Virginia. She used to love to highlight this to show the differences in capabilities. So the upper left there shows you the number of surface VLS capability, that is vertical launch systems. And what you see there is the number of cells that you can put missiles in U.S. Navy vessels. Now, I should be clear about something. While you have about 8,000 cells you see right there, that doesn't mean we have 8,000 missiles, and it doesn't mean we have 8,000 cells that can be deployed. A lot of those cells were on ships that never got away from the dock. Several cruisers, that the Vicksburg, and other ships that just would not get underway. And then when you look at the undersea VLS capability, you see a really big drop right there as we phase out a couple of vessels. In particularly, what we're phasing out is older boomers. These are ballistic missile submarines, 4 of them, that have been converted to carry Tomahawk cruise missiles. They became what are called SSGNs, guided missile nuclear submarines. And then you see torpedo capacity and sortie generation. And the big thing was VLS. VLS was the thing that was getting a lot of attention, especially right around the 2027 time frame, where we saw the decline, because that was seen as the Davidson window, when there was a big fear that China would be at its best capability to invade Taiwan. So in Navy parlance, this is the FYDP, the Future Year Defense Program. It goes out 5 years. It looks at the 5 years coming up, so FY25 to FY29. And that's usually pretty locked in. This is what they want to build. And so this is kind of the closest we see. To tell you the truth, anything beyond 5 years is very notional. But you'll see right here for 5 years, number one, there's not another carrier authorized. The money that's going into the carriers are basically paying for the carriers that are being built and some future outlays for new carriers. You'll see there the Arleigh Burkes, the DDG-51s, 2 of them are being built each year. However, toward the end of the FYDP, right around 2028, you start laying up Burke-class destroyers. So we're not going to be increasing that number. We're actually going to be either holding steady or losing them at a faster rate, because we built more Burkes in some years than 2. FFG 62, all right, so you see 7 of them in there, with 2 being built in 26 and 28. That is assuming we ever award a second yard a contract, because Fincantieri has got to get up to speed. I just talked about the fact that they're a year behind now, so that's a problem. SSN 774, that's the Virginia-class submarines. Largely 2 a year there. They took 1 away in 2025 because the Virginia-class are running behind. Let's be clear why that is. We were only building 1 submarine a year from the 1990s to the 2010s. That really hurt our industrial base. You can't just ramp it up. When you go from 1 sub to 2 sub, doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a 100% increase. And let's not forget, we're also building another sub, which is the replacement for the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, what are called the new District of Columbia class. That's the 826s. 4 of them in the FYDP. Just take a moment here and notice the cost of these monsters. Each of them are about 10, not million, billion dollars. $10 billion for a ballistic missile submarine. We have a requirement for 12 of them. That is really, really pricey when you look at it and you see that the Virginia class there are probably right around $5 billion. So this new submarine is really expensive. LPD-17, which is the kind of the replacement for the LSDs being phased in. God, the fight over these platforms are ridiculous. You see the replacement of a new LHA because the WASP class is going to start retiring here. You have the LSMs. This is the Marine Corps vehicle that I did a whole video on. You can check up above there. This is the light amphibious warfare vessel that now it's called the LSM. The Marines really want this. You should be paying attention to the U.S. Army LSVs and LCU 2000s crossing the Atlantic to give yourself an idea of what LSMs are all about. The Oilers, these are the John Lewises. They're replacing the Henry J. Kaisers. We need to be building these, need about 20 of these. And then there's a next generation logistics ship, which I have no idea what the heck they want in this thing. They want a smaller logistics ships. Basically, I would go buy a plan from one of the NATO navies or Japan or South Korea who build these things. Easy to get. Replacement for the sonar surveillance vessels, that's Taegos 25. And then submarine tenders. We have 2 submarine tenders right now. They are really, really old. They need to be replaced. And so there are plans to replace them. Over $1 billion for a sub-tender. And then the second one is at $1.6 billion. Man, that's an expensive friggin' sub-tender out there when you can probably just get a commercial ship and convert it for a lot cheaper. So one of the things we see in this report is a lot of tables. And there's a ton of these tables. They look at long-range procurement. So this is when you basically fund the vessel. Not when the vessel comes in, but when you're funding it. And they break it down into the different categories. And they have it in 2 charts here. One of it is according to the 2025 shipbuilding plan. That's to go to that huge number, that 515 ships. And then there's the alternative to the shipbuilding plan, which basically looks at the original kind of numbers we were looking at for roughly a 355 ship Navy. Then here, this is the delivery plans. This is when the vessels are supposed to come in. I'm going to focus on one line here and break this down for you to give you an idea. I'm not going to do them all because it'll be crazy. But I'm going to look at the aircraft carriers because the aircraft carriers is a really interesting one. But these are when they're delivered, and this is when they phase out. This chart then shows you the kind of the culmination. The plus and minuses are all tabulated here. And if you look at the bottom numbers here in 2025 under the 2025 shipbuilding plan, we're going to be at 287 vessels. And we're going to go down to 280 vessels in 2027. Remember I told you the Davidson window, this is the moment of vulnerability everybody's talking about? Well, we're going to be at basically our lowest level then. And then we don't get up to roughly our top number, which is going to be right around 380 vessels. You'll see it right here, about 2042. And then at the very end, 2054, we're at about 387 vessels. If you use the alternative to the shipbuilding plan, it gets you up to in the 340s, about 348, 345, right around 2042, 2043. The other element in here is the plans to decommission ships, and this is the one that gets a lot of attention all the time. So in 2025, the plan is to decommission 19 vessels. The plan is only to build a few vessels. This is the problem, is you're decommissioning a lot faster than you're getting rid of. 6 new vessels compared to 19 being commissioned. You're seeing 4 cruisers are going. The cruisers have been going away for a while. That's going to continue. So you're going to see the demise of the Ticonderoga class cruisers going out. You see 3 of the Los Angeles class submarines going. 2 of the LCSs, this is LCS 6 and 8, going out. An LSD, 4 minesweeping vessels, and then 5 vessels from Military Sea Lift Command. 4 of the Spearhead class expeditionary fast transport. Spearhead needs to go. Her bow's broken. She should have been gone a long time ago. And then some others. And then the John Glenn, which I just mentioned the John Glenn the other day because that would have been the vessel I would be converting right now. The ship's only 10 years old. 10 years old. It's a heavy lift vessel. Should be converted into something either to carry Army watercraft or other types of watercraft, or convert it into a hospital ship or something, or to an ESB. Do something with it. It's crazy to scrap a ship that's $500 million after just 10 years. And then in 2017, you see the first decommissioning of a Nimitz-class carrier with the Nimitz going. Then you have 3 cruisers, an LCS, another batch of Los Angeles class, 3 of them going, and then the first 2 of the guided missile submarines going. That'll be Ohio and Florida. More of the LSDs, and then we start seeing the underway replenishment vessels start going. These are the Kaiser class. These were built back in starting in the mid 80s into the 90s. First 2 of them, or actually the next 2 of them go. We've already lost 2 in this process already, but they're going to go. And then the Fleet Tug and 2 salvage ships. And once again, I'm going to highlight this. We're going to get rid of our last salvage ships. The first one, the Navajo, the new one, hasn't come on service yet. And the other ones won't be on service yet. So we're getting rid of salvage vessels before we have salvage vessels in place. 2022, you see 2 more of the cruisers go. You see a boomer go. We're seeing the first phase out of the SSBNs. We had one in the last year, I believe, go out here. I think we did. No, I think this is the first ones the SBNs go. 3 more oilers go. The last of the minesweepers go, and the command ship Mount Whitney goes. 2028, the first Burke-class destroyers go, more submarines, boomers, guided missile, Los Angeles-class, and LSDs. And then in 2029, more destroyers start going, more oilers. You're just seeing a massive drawdown in the fleet. So let me give you a little breakdown in how this 30-year shipbuilding plan works. And we're going to look at aircraft carriers. So right now, the Navy has a grand total of 10 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers and 1 Ford-class carrier. That's 11 of carriers right here. And so these are the carriers with the years provided of when they're planning to phase out. And we had the Ford come in. The Ford replaced the Enterprise, the very first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that's sitting down in Newport News right now, waiting to be decommissioned. The first carrier, the Nimitz, is planned to go in 2026. And then you see them phase out here year by year. So I'm going to walk you through the 30-year plan here and talk a little bit about this. So in 2025, you see the introduction of the John F. Kennedy. As I mentioned to you before, Kennedy is way late, 10 years behind schedule. So when Kennedy comes into service, you'll see Nimitz go away. And this will maintain you at about 11 carriers. Now remember, the objective was to be 12 carriers, but we never get close to that. We're at 11 carriers here throughout this. Then you see the arrival of Enterprise CVN 80. Yes, love, great name. Good classic name for an aircraft carrier. Can we be clear? Let's get away from presidents and go back to classic aircraft carrier names. So in 2029, Enterprise arrives. In 2030, we see Dwight D. Eisenhower, which is right now in the Red Sea, going to go away. In 2031, we see the 2032, excuse me, the Doris Miller comes in. Great name. I'll give you that one. I'm not going to fault that one. That's a good name right there. Dory Miller comes in 2022. And in 2033, you see Carl Vinson. So we're kind of maintaining the 11 carriers right here. Then you have a big gap because the TR, the Teddy Roosevelt, goes away in 2037. And the plan here has this next one being built in 2040, but there were plans to have it in 2036. So if they don't get it built in 2036, this would be CVN 82. It doesn't have a name yet. I'm going to go with Lexington. Let's go classic here. So if Lexington comes in, then 2036, you beat it before you see the demise of TR. If not, you're going to have a big gap, and it'll be 2040 till you see it. 2041, Lincoln goes away. And then CVN 83, let's go Saratoga here. Saratoga shows up in 2043. And then 2046, you see the George Washington go. And then you see the Stennis go. Those ships were bought together. It was a pair. And so they're going to phase out together. So you're actually going to have a period here where you're only looking at 9 aircraft carriers. And this happens a bit in the plan. So nowhere near the 12. And again, this is assuming that the Ford-class carriers come out on time. Remember, Kennedy's taking 10 years to build. These are taking a lot longer, and then even when they're coming out, they're taking longer to field. So in 2048, you have CVN 84 go on. Let's go Yorktown. Let's go classic right there. And then in 2052, the next one, CVN 85, comes in. Let's go Hornet. And then 2053, you see the phase out of the Reagan. And so in 2053, there's a couple of things that we should be aware of that's really important. Number one, I'm going to be 86 years old, and I'm not sure I'm going to be around to keep doing this for you guys, or else there may be the AI version of what's going on with shipping. I'm liking this. AI version of me, first off, hair, a lot of hair, look much younger. You can't get better looks than this, but still, we'll work on something here. We'll have to think about this for 2053. But anyway, in terms of carriers, we're looking pretty low right here. You're looking at basically Bush, the last Nimitz-class carrier, and the Ford, and then the introduction of 7 more. That's 9 aircraft carriers. That's assuming you can maintain that. Because understand, to maintain 10 aircraft carriers over a 50-year lifespan of a ship, you need to be building them every 5 years. We're nowhere close to that. Again, Ford took a long time to come out, 7 years to build, and then even quite a few more years to go on its first deployment. Kennedy's taking 10 years. Enterprise is taking 7. Miller looks like it's going to take 9 years. You've got to get that down, or else you're going to have these gaps. And this is the problem you have in the Navy shipbuilding plan. You have these big gaps. So the last section I want to highlight is this one. This is Appendix 5, and there's a series of appendix in here. This is the Auxiliary and Sealift Shipbuilding Plan. These are basically the reserve vessels. This appendix was thrown on one of these 30-year plans a few years ago by a staffer. I heard the whole story about this, and there really wasn't a lot of thought about it, but it has become a feature of it. So they talk about auxiliary vessels, which is really interesting, but what I want to go is the sealift side. So this is the sealift table, and let me be clear, I don't think this is extremely accurate for a variety of reasons. So for example, it shows currently 15 vessels in the pre-positioning role with a required inventory of 19. Okay, we're nowhere near that. As it states in here, the Marine Corps, the Maritime Pre-Positioning Force, which supports the Marine Corps, 5 of those ships, which are really old, have been basically withdrawn except for one of them from service, and one of the older LMSRs has been pulled out, so that you only have a handful of ships left out there working it. And even the Army pre-positioning has been reduced down to 5 roll-on, roll-off ships and 2 container ships. There's 2 Air Force container ships out there, so that's well below. But the thing I want to highlight down here is that last paragraph. Sealift surge vessels operate under MSC and the Maritime Administration. The FY 2025 surge fleet consists of 52 roll-on, roll-off vessels, including 7 used vessels procured in FY 2021 to 2024. Okay, I only know of 5 that have been procured, so we're missing 2 in that. And of the 5 that have been procured, 3 of them are great. They're 10 years old. They're beautiful ships. 2 of them are 25-year-old Korean-built roll-on, roll-off ships that were operated by a U.S. carrier under the Maritime Security Program, and those 2 ships, which had been U.S. flagged, cannot get reflagged, cannot become operational because of issues associated with them. This is a big problem. And then it says by the end of 2025, 3 of the cargo ships will transition from PREPO, this is the afloat prepositioning reduced operating status, to MARAD's RRF fleet. And then 2 additional used RRF vessels will be procured in 2025, and we'll lose 2. I want to see the math on this. I really want to see the math on this, because I've done this, and I don't want to bore you with another chart here, but the math does not match up. And when you look at the fit-up they did for Sealift here, if you look at Surge Sealift in terms of procurement and conversion, first off, they upped the money quite a bit, because the last Sealift ships they bought cost between $90 to $110 million a piece, and that did not include conversion costs, so they were a lot pricier. They were actually more to buy than the Italian line that bought them paid 10 years ago. So we paid more for a used ship than the Italians bought for a new ship. I don't think that makes sense. And nowhere in here is a chart or a line that says, hey, let's build new Sealift ships here in the United States. We just don't see that. There's new construction down here. We see it, outside the fit-up starting in 2030. But let me tell you how this works. Next year, when the fit-up includes FY30, that number 1 down here that's showing you building 1 new ship here, that's going to be pushed back to 2038. Because this is what's happened over the past few years. That's exactly what's going to happen. So again, I come back to this. I just want to see the numbers on this. I don't understand the pre-positioning numbers right here, because I don't think we have yet to hear what the Marine Corps wants to do about pre-positioning. The Army is in kind of a holding pattern right now when it comes to that. So the entire concept of a float pre-positioning, which should be on everyone's mind because of what's happening with having to deploy from Virginia to Gaza a floating pier, that should be of interest. And then these roll-on, roll-off ships. One of the things that they mention in here is the requirement for square footage. So right here, the requirement for pre-positioning is 4.92 million square feet of cargo capacity and surge sealift of 10.6 million square feet. So roughly 15 million square feet. The problem is I don't think those numbers are right in the categories they're at. I think we have less square footage afloat than we do. I think there may be more in the ro-ro capacity in the surge, but we are also losing the 5 ships we have brought on to the surge sealift fleet. We have lost 7 ships in the meantime, and we're going to lose 2 more here very shortly, and we may lose more because they're really old. I mean, the average age of the sealift fleet is 44, 45 years old. So we definitely need to do something, and there's no discussion in here at all about what's being done to help the U.S. Merchant Marine build. It shouldn't come out of the Navy budget, but there should be arguments and talking about increasing commercial shipping here at the same time, which is not present at all. All right, that's my rundown of the U.S. Navy's 30-year shipbuilding plan. Again, I didn't break down every category. I could have done it with nuclear submarines, could have done with boomers, could have done the small combatants, the large combatants, but I thought the carriers was probably the best demonstration of the issue. For a nation that says we need 12 aircraft carriers, we sure the heck don't have them. And matter of fact, at times we're going to be down to 9. And let's remember, when you're at 9 aircraft carriers, you don't have 9 aircraft carriers because one's always being refueled. That's a long 3-year, 5-year process. It takes a long time to refuel an aircraft carrier because of the nuclear rods. And then that leaves you 4 on each coast. That means 1 deployed, 1 coming back, 1 going out, and 1 in maintenance. That's it. That's what you got. That's what you got out of that. And so it doesn't give you all the capabilities you think you get for a Navy that wants to be everywhere all the time. That's not presence at all. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon where you can become a yearly and monthly provider, supporter, whatever you want to call it. So next episode, Sal, signing off.